I remember the cold first. Not the kind of cold you feel on Earth during winter, where you can bundle up and find warmth in layers and hot drinks. This was a cold that seemed to exist inside my bones, as if someone had replaced my marrow with liquid nitrogen and forgotten to tell me about it. My eyes wouldn't open at first. They felt glued shut, crusted over with something I couldn't identify. When I finally managed to pry them apart, the light that greeted me was wrong. It wasn't the warm yellow of sunlight or the sterile white of hospital fluorescence. It was a pale, pulsing blue that seemed to breathe with its own rhythm, expanding and contracting like the walls themselves were alive. The ceiling above me was curved, organic in a way that human architecture never achieves. There were no straight lines, no sharp corners. Everything flowed into everything else like the interior of a seashell or the chambers of a heart. I tried to move my arms and found them strapped down to whatever surface I was lying on. The restraints weren't leather or plastic or anything I recognized. They felt like warm silk that had somehow hardened into an unbreakable grip. My throat burned when I tried to speak. The words came out as a ragged croak, barely human. Where am I? No answer came from the empty room. I turned my head, the only part of my body I could move freely, and took in my surroundings with growing horror. The room was circular, about 20 feet in diameter, with walls that shifted between shades of blue and purple in that same breathing rhythm I had noticed in the light. There were no windows. No doors that I could see. Just those living walls and a collection of equipment that looked like it had been grown rather than built. Tubes and tendrils extended from various organic-looking machines, and, with a jolt of fear, I realized that several of them were connected to my body. I couldn't remember how I had gotten here. I searched my memory desperately, trying to find the thread that would lead me back to understanding. My name was Marcus Chen. I was 34 years old. I was a structural engineer from Seattle. I had been on my way home from work. It was a Tuesday. I remembered the rain on my windshield, the red glow of brake lights ahead of me, and then nothing. A void where memory should be, like someone had taken scissors to the film of my life and cut out the most important scene. "You are awake," a voice said, and I nearly choked on my own tongue. I whipped my head toward the sound and saw a section of the wall peeling away, opening like a flower blooming in fast forward. Through the opening stepped a creature that made my mind go blank with disbelief. It was roughly humanoid in shape, but that was where the similarities ended. Its skin, if you could call it skin, was a translucent gray that allowed me to see the dark organs pulsing beneath. It had 4 arms, 2 large ones that hung at its sides and 2 smaller ones tucked close to its chest. Its head was elongated, with no visible mouth or nose, just 2 enormous eyes that seemed to contain entire galaxies within them, swirling patterns of gold and silver that shifted as it looked at me. "Do not attempt to move," the creature said, though I couldn't see how it was speaking. The words seemed to appear directly in my mind, accompanied by a strange tingling sensation at the base of my skull. "Your physical form has sustained significant damage. We are in the process of repairing it." "What are you?" I managed to gasp out. "Where am I? What happened to me?" The creature tilted its head in a gesture that seemed almost bird-like. "I am Nurse Vethkasorn. You are aboard the healing station Kethmasivor, currently positioned in orbit around what your species calls Jupiter. As for what happened to you..." The creature paused, and I could have sworn I saw something like discomfort pass across its alien features. "There was an incident. A vessel malfunctioned during your transport. You were not supposed to wake yet. The sedative should have kept you unconscious for another 3 of your solar rotations." My mind was reeling. Jupiter? Transport? I was supposed to be driving home from work. I was supposed to be stuck in traffic on the I-5, not strapped to a table on an alien space station orbiting the largest planet in our solar system. "I don't understand," I said, and I hated how small my voice sounded. "I was on Earth. I was in my car. I don't remember any vessel or any transport. You have to send me back. This is a mistake." Nurse Vethkasorn approached my bed, if that's what it was, with a gliding motion that seemed to defy gravity. Those galaxy eyes examined me with an intensity that made me feel like every atom of my being was being catalogued and analyzed. There is no mistake, Marcus Chen. You were selected. Your genetic profile matched our requirements precisely. The Council of Mending has been searching for a human specimen with your particular characteristics for quite some time. The creature's smaller arms began manipulating one of the organic machines near my head, and I felt a cold sensation spread through my skull. However, I must inform you that there has been a complication. A complication? My voice cracked on the word. What kind of complication? During the transport process, a miscalculation occurred in the biological preservation sequence. The technician responsible, a junior member of the species known as the Vrel, made an error in the calibration of your cellular stasis field. As a result, several of your internal organs were. Vethkasorn paused again, searching for words. Partially restructured in ways that were not intended. Ice flooded my veins that had nothing to do with the alien cold of the room. What does that mean? What did you do to me? Your heart was replaced with a synthetic organ designed for a species with silicon-based biology. Your liver was accidentally merged with tissue samples from a Kethmasai entity. And your left kidney is now producing an enzyme that, in humans, acts as a powerful neurotoxin. The creature delivered this information with the clinical detachment of someone reading a grocery list. You should, by all biological measures, be dead. The fact that you are not is a source of considerable interest to the Council. I couldn't breathe. The information was too enormous, too impossible to process. I had been abducted from Earth, brought to an alien space station, and had my organs replaced and modified against my will. And now I was lying here, apparently defying death itself through some quirk of fate that even my captors didn't understand. Let me go, I said, and this time my voice was stronger. Something was kindling in my chest, right where my alien heart now beat, something that felt like anger. You had no right. No right to take me, no right to experiment on me. I have a life. I have a family. Let me go right now. Vethkasorn's galaxy eyes swirled with what might have been surprise. I am afraid that is not possible. Even if the Council permitted your return, which they will not, your modified biology would not survive the journey back to Earth. The artificial heart requires a specific combination of atmospheric gases to function, gases that do not exist in your planet's atmosphere. The enzyme from your kidney would poison you within days without the treatments we provide here. You are, for all practical purposes, dependent on this station for your continued survival. The anger in my chest was growing, spreading through my limbs like fire. I pulled against the restraints, and, to both my shock and Vethkasorn's, one of them tore. That is not possible, the nurse said, stumbling backward. Those restraints are designed to hold species with 10 times your muscular density. I didn't stop to question it. I tore at the other restraint with my free hand, feeling the warm silk material shred beneath my fingers like wet paper. Then, my legs were free, and I was sitting up, ripping the tubes and tendrils from my body with a fury that seemed to come from somewhere outside myself. Marcus Chen, you must stop, Vethkasorn said, and now there was something like fear in that voice that wasn't a voice. Your body is not stable. You do not understand what I understand enough, I snarled, and my voice sounded different. Deeper. More resonant. As if it was coming from a larger chest cavity than I had ever possessed. I understand that you stole me from my life. I understand that you butchered my body without my consent. And I understand that you expect me to be grateful that I'm still alive to suffer through it. I swung my legs off the bed and stood for the first time. My legs held, though they felt strange. Longer somehow, and more powerful. I looked down at my body and saw that it had changed in ways beyond the internal modifications Vethkasorn had described. My skin had a faint luminescent quality to it now, as if something was glowing just beneath the surface. The muscles of my arms were more defined than they had ever been, even when I was at my peak physical fitness in my 20s. And my hands looked wrong. The fingers were too long, the joints too prominent, the nails almost claw-like. What did you do to me? I whispered, turning my hands over and over in the pulsing blue light. The modifications were more extensive than initially realized, Vethkasorn said, backing toward the wall that was a door. The cellular restructuring appears to have triggered a cascade effect. Your body is adapting, evolving to incorporate the alien elements that were introduced. This has never happened before with a human subject. The council will want to study, no. The word came out like a thunderclap, and I felt something surge through me, some energy that seemed to originate in that synthetic heart and spread outward to every cell of my transformed body. The machines around me flickered and sparked. The lights in the room pulsed erratically. And Vethkasorn, for all their alien composure, let out a sound of pure terror. You cannot leave this room, the nurse said, and I saw one of their smaller arms pressing something against the wall. Your physiology is unstable. You could die at any moment. The council, I don't care about your council. I took a step forward, and the floor beneath my feet seemed to vibrate with the impact. I'm going to find a way off this station. I'm going to find a way back to Earth. And I'm going to make everyone who did this to me answer for it. The wall door began to close, but I was faster than I had ever been. I crossed the room in 3 strides and caught the edge of the opening just before it sealed. The material that had felt like living tissue resisted my grip for a moment, then tore. Beyond the doorway was a corridor, curved like everything else on this station, lit with the same pulsing blue light. And, standing in that corridor, clearly having been summoned by Vethkasorn, were 3 more aliens. These were different from the nurse. They were shorter, stockier, covered in what looked like natural armor, plates of bone or chitin that overlapped like the scales of some enormous insect. Their eyes were small and red, set deep in faces that were all angles and hard edges. Each of them held a weapon that pulsed with contained energy. The human must be contained, one of them said in that same telepathic voice. Sedate it. The first energy bolt hit me square in the chest, and I braced for pain, for unconsciousness, for death. Instead, I felt warmth. A pleasant tingling sensation that spread from the point of impact throughout my body. The alien heart in my chest hummed with satisfaction, as if it was feeding on the energy they were throwing at me. That's not possible, another guard said, and I could hear the panic in their mental voice. Increase power. 2 more bolts struck me. Then, 3. The warmth increased, and, with it came clarity, a sudden, crystalline understanding of what I had become. The medical error that should have killed me had instead created something new. The combination of human biology with alien technology and organic material had produced a hybrid that shouldn't exist, that defied the rules of every species represented on this station. I was no longer fully human. But I wasn't alien either. I was something else entirely. Something that could apparently absorb energy and grow stronger from it. I didn't know what to do with this realization. Part of me, the old Marcus Chen, the structural engineer from Seattle who spent his weekends hiking and his evenings watching bad television, wanted to curl up in a corner and wait for someone to tell him this was all a nightmare. But that part of me was getting quieter by the moment, drowned out by a new voice that spoke in the language of survival and rage. I moved. The guards never had a chance. I was among them before they could adjust their weapons, my new hands closing around their armored throats with strength I didn't know I possessed. I didn't want to kill them even in my transformed state, even with fury burning through every synapse. I wasn't a killer, but I needed them out of my way. I threw them against the walls of the corridor, and the sound they made when they hit was deeply satisfying. Vethkasorn, I said, turning back to the nurse who was still pressed against the interior wall of my former prison. You're going to help me. I cannot, the nurse said, and those galaxy eyes were wide with terror. The council, I don't care about your council, I repeated, and I stepped back into the room, towering over the creature in a way that felt natural despite my still disorienting new height. But I do care about surviving. You said my body would kill me without treatment. You're going to give me that treatment. You're going to teach me how to maintain this new biology. And you're going to help me find a way home. Even if I wanted to help you, returning to Earth is impossible. I told you, you told me my artificial heart couldn't survive in Earth's atmosphere. So we'll modify it again. Or we'll find a way to create the gases I need. Or we'll do something else, something no one has thought of yet. Because I'm apparently already impossible, so why stop now? Vethkasorn stared at me for a long moment. I could see calculations happening behind those swirling eyes, some alien version of risk assessment and cost-benefit analysis. Finally, the nurse's shoulders slumped in a gesture of defeat that was apparently universal. If I help you, the council will have me terminated. If you don't help me, I'll terminate you myself. I wasn't sure if I meant it, but the words came out with enough conviction that Vethkasorn believed them. And then, I'll find someone else who will help. One way or another, I'm getting off this station. The nurse was silent for another moment. Then, those smaller arms began moving again, manipulating the organic technology of the room in ways I couldn't follow. There may be a way, Vethkasorn said finally. But, it will require going to the deep levels of the station, where the council does not go. There are laboratories there, abandoned since the last war. Technologies that were deemed too dangerous to use. If we can reach them, then, let's go. I grabbed one of the discarded energy weapons from the corridor and examined it. The device seemed to understand my intent, reshaping itself in my grip until it fit my transformed hands perfectly. And, Vethkasorn? If you try to betray me, if you alert the council or try to lead me into a trap, I will make what happened to those guards look like a gentle massage. Do you understand? I understand, the nurse said, and, for the first time, I heard something like respect in that telepathic voice. You are not like other humans we have taken, Marcus-chan. No, I agreed, feeling the alien heart pound with new purpose in my chest. I'm not. Not anymore. We stepped out into the corridor together, stepping over the groaning forms of the guards, and began our journey into the depths of the station. Behind us, alarms began to sound, a wailing tone that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The hunt had begun. But, for the first time since I had woken up in this nightmare, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like something far more dangerous. The corridors of the HFY station twisted and turned in ways that defied logic. Sometimes they sloped upward when we should have been going down. Sometimes they doubled back on themselves, leading us in circles until Vethkasorn consulted some internal navigation system I couldn't perceive. The walls continued their organic pulsing, but now I noticed other details, veins of darker material running through them like the circulatory system of some vast creature, small nodes that blinked with bioluminescence as we passed, patches of what might have been mold or might have been some kind of communication network. This station, I said as we descended a spiraling ramp into deeper levels. It's alive, isn't it? Vethkasorn made a sound that might have been a laugh if it had come from a human throat. In a manner of speaking. The HFY, my species, do not build our structures. We grow them. Every wall, every floor, every piece of equipment you see is part of a single organism that we have cultivated over thousands of your years. The station provides for us, and we provide for it. It is a symbiotic relationship. So when I tore through those restraints, when I damaged the wall. You heard it, yes. Not seriously, it will heal, but it felt the pain. Vethkasorn glanced back at me with those galaxy eyes. The station knows what you are now, Marcus-chan. It knows you are dangerous. It will be watching us, alerting the council to our movements. Then, why are you helping me? If the station is going to give us away anyway? The nurse was quiet for a long moment. When the response finally came, it was tinged with something I hadn't expected, sadness. Because what was done to you was wrong. The council speaks of the greater healing, of the noble work we do in advancing medical knowledge for all species. But, there is no healing in what they did to you. There was only curiosity and cruelty dressed up in scientific language. I became a nurse to ease suffering, not to cause it. If helping you escape means my termination, perhaps that is a price worth paying to reclaim some small portion of my integrity. I didn't know how to respond to that. The rage that had been driving me since I woke up was still there, still burning, but it was complicated now by this confession of conscience from a creature I had been ready to kill moments ago. I'm sorry, I said finally. For threatening you. For the guards. I'm not. I wasn't like this before. I don't know what's happening to me. Your body is flooded with hormones and compounds that your original biology was never designed to process, Vethkasorn explained. The synthetic heart produces chemicals that enhance aggression and physical capability. It was designed for a warrior species. The liver modification is filtering your blood in ways that affect your emotional regulation. And the neurotoxin from your kidney, while not killing you, is altering your neural pathways in unpredictable ways. You are, quite literally, not the same person you were before you were taken. Will it get better? Will I be myself again? I do not know. Your case is unprecedented. The changes may stabilize over time, or they may continue to accelerate. You may find balance between your human self and the new elements, or one may eventually overwhelm the other. All I can tell you is that right now, in this moment, you are still making choices. You chose not to kill those guards. You chose to seek a way home rather than simply rampaging through the station. Those choices tell me that Marcus Chen is still in there somewhere, fighting to remain who he was. The corridor opened up into a vast chamber, and I stopped dead in my tracks. The space before us was enormous, easily the size of a football stadium, and filled with what I could only describe as a forest. But the trees weren't trees. They were towering structures of flesh and bone, their branches spreading out overhead to create a canopy that blocked out the ceiling entirely. The ground beneath our feet was soft and yielding, covered in a carpet of something that was half moss and half living tissue. Bioluminescent creatures the size of hummingbirds flitted between the branches, leaving trails of light in their wake. And, in the center of the chamber, rising up like the heart of the forest itself, was a massive structure that pulsed with its own rhythm, slower and deeper than the walls of the station, like the heartbeat of something ancient and powerful. What is this place? I breathed. The core garden, Vethkasorn said, and there was reverence in the nurse's voice. The original seed from which the entire station was grown. It is over 50,000 of your years old, a fragment of our homeworld, brought across the stars when the Kethmasai first began their journey. To enter here without the Council's blessing is punishable by absorption into the station's biomass. We are both criminals now, Marcus Chen. Then, we better make it count. I stepped forward onto the living carpet, and the sensation was strange, warm and slightly sticky, but not unpleasant. The bioluminescent creatures scattered at my approach, their light trails painting abstract patterns in the air. How do we get to these laboratories you mentioned? Through the core itself. The abandoned levels are beneath it, in the oldest parts of the station. Parts that the current council has sealed off and forbidden. But the core knows all, sees all. If we can make contact with it, perhaps. Perhaps what? Vethkasorn hesitated. Perhaps it will recognize what you are. What you could become. The core is the oldest consciousness on this station. It remembers the wars, the experiments, the species that have come and gone. It may see value in you that the council cannot perceive. We made our way through the forest, the living trees seeming to lean away from us as we passed. I could feel something watching us, not the aggressive surveillance of the station's walls, but something older and more patient. The core, I supposed. Observing. Assessing. As we approached the central structure, I began to hear something. Not through my ears, but through that same telepathic channel that the aliens used for communication. It was a voice, impossibly old and deep, speaking in concepts rather than words. You are broken, the voice said, and I felt it resonate in my bones, in my alien heart, in every cell of my transformed body. You are mended wrongly. You are new. I am Marcus Chen, I said out loud, though I suspected the core could read my thoughts directly. I was taken from my home and experimented on without my consent. I want to find a way back to Earth. Earth is small. Earth is brief. You could be more than Earth. I don't want to be more. I want to be me. I want my life back. The core was silent for a moment, and I could feel it rifling through my memories, my childhood in San Francisco, my years in college, my first job, my wedding day, the divorce 3 years later, the quiet apartment in Seattle where I had been trying to rebuild something from the wreckage of my life. It saw all of it, experienced all of it, and I felt laid bare in a way I had never experienced before. You were already broken, the core said finally. Before we took you. Before the error. You were a creature of regret and fear and small dreams. The taking did not break you. It gave you the chance to become unbroken. I didn't ask for that chance. Few do. Fewer still are worthy of it. But, you have something we have not seen in many cycles. You adapt. You absorb. You transform. The error should have killed you, but instead it made you stronger. This is rare. This is valuable. This is interesting. The central structure began to open, the massive walls of flesh parting like the petals of a flower. Inside, I could see a spiraling passage leading downward into darkness. Go, the core said. Find what you seek in the old places. The knowledge you need is there. But, know this, Marcus Chen, the man who enters those depths will not be the man who leaves them. You will be tested. You will be changed. And, when you emerge, you will have to choose what you will become. And, if I don't like the choices? Then, you will die. But, death is just another transformation, for those brave enough to embrace it. I looked at Vethkasorn, who had fallen to their knees at the core's words, those galaxy eyes wider than I had ever seen them. Are you coming? I asked. The nurse looked up at me, and I saw a decision being made behind those alien eyes. Slowly, Vethkasorn rose. To the end, the nurse said. Whatever that end may be. Together, we stepped into the opening, and the walls of the core closed behind us like the jaws of some enormous beast. The darkness swallowed us whole, and we began our descent into the oldest secrets of the station. Behind us, in the corridors we had fled through, I heard the first sounds of pursuit. The council had found our trail. The hunt was closing in. But I was no longer afraid. The old Marcus Chen, the one who had driven through rain and traffic, dreaming of nothing more than a quiet evening and an early bedtime, that man might have been afraid. But he was dying, cell by cell, replaced by something new. Something that had been forged in error and pain and the desperate refusal to accept extinction. I thought of something my grandmother used to say, back when I was a child and the world seemed too big and too frightening to face. The man who destroys his weak self, she would tell me, can never be destroyed by others. I had never understood what she meant until now. In the darkness of the core, surrounded by technology and secrets older than human civilization, I began to understand. The weak Marcus Chen, the one who had been content with mediocrity, who had let his marriage fail through passivity, who had spent his evenings numbing himself with television because he was too afraid to want anything more, that man was being destroyed. Not by the aliens, not by the medical error, but by himself. By the choice he was making in every moment to survive, to fight, to refuse to be a victim. And, from the ashes of that weak self, something stronger was being born. I didn't know yet what I would become. I didn't know if I would ever see Earth again, or if the thing that returned would even be recognizable as Marcus Chen. But I knew, with a certainty that went deeper than bone, that I would not be destroyed. Not by the council. Not by the station. Not by anything in this vast, terrifying universe. Because I was doing the destroying myself. End of part 1. The passage spiraled downward in a helix pattern, the walls close enough to touch on either side. Unlike the rest of the station, these walls were dormant, no pulsing light, no sense of living awareness. It was as if we had entered a part of the organism that had died long ago, preserved but no longer vital. Vethkasorn produced a small globe from somewhere within their robes that cast a soft amber light, illuminating our path. The shadows it created were strange, dancing in ways that didn't quite match our movements, as if they had their own agenda. How far down do these laboratories go? I asked, my voice echoing off the dead walls. Further than anyone knows, Vethkasorn replied. The station grew downward for millennia before the current council took power. They sealed these levels after the Convergence War, declared them contaminated and forbidden. Most of what's down here has been forgotten. But you haven't forgotten. The nurse made that almost laugh sound again. I am older than I appear, Marcus-chan. I served under the previous council, before the coup that brought the current leaders to power. I was there when they sealed these levels. I know what they were trying to hide. And, what was that? Hope. Possibility. The chance that species could evolve beyond their limitations without being controlled by those in power. Vethkasorn's galaxy eyes reflected the amber light in strange patterns. The council fears what they cannot control. And, what lies in these depths cannot be controlled by anyone. We continued our descent in silence. The air grew colder the deeper we went, and I noticed frost forming on the dead walls, actual frost, crystals of ice that shouldn't exist in a living station. My alien heart adjusted, pumping harder to maintain my body temperature, and I felt a flush of warmth spread through my limbs. Your modifications are adapting, Vethkasorn observed. The synthetic heart is responding to environmental challenges without conscious direction. This is remarkable. It doesn't feel remarkable. It feels like I'm a passenger in my own body. Perhaps you are. Or perhaps you are simply learning to share your body with something else. Partnership rather than possession. The distinction may matter more than you realize. I thought about that as we walked. The anger that had burned so hot in my chest was still there, but it had settled into something more sustainable, a low flame rather than a roaring fire. Was that me learning to control my new biology, or was my new biology learning to control me? Did the difference even matter, as long as I survived? The spiral passage finally opened into a vast underground space. The amber light from Vethkasorn's globe couldn't penetrate the darkness more than a few dozen feet, but I could sense the enormity of the chamber around us. The dead walls had given way to living stone, actual rock, not organic material. This part of the station had been grown around something that was already here, something that predated the HFY by unknown ages. We are beneath the core now, Vethkasorn said, their voice hushed with something like awe. In the foundations of the station. The rock you see is from a world that no longer exists, a planet that was destroyed in a war so old that even the core barely remembers it. When the HFY first came here, they found these ruins already waiting. The laboratories were built to study what they found. What did they find? Instead of answering, Vethkasorn moved forward, and the amber light revealed what I had been sensing in the darkness. Structures. Buildings. An entire city carved into the rock, stretching away in all directions as far as I could see. The architecture was unlike anything I had encountered on the station, sharp angles and geometric precision, as different from the organic HFY aesthetic as possible. Doors and windows gaped like empty eye sockets. Streets laid out in perfect grid patterns disappeared into the shadows. The architects, Vethkasorn breathed. The species that existed before all others, who built the first starships and seeded life throughout the galaxy. Every intelligent species, every civilization that has ever existed, can trace their origins back to them. Including humans. And they built this? Under a moon of Jupiter? They built everywhere. Their empire stretched across galaxies. This is just one of millions of installations they left behind. Most have been destroyed or picked clean over the eons. But, this one was sealed away by the HFY before anyone else could find it. The technology here is beyond anything the current council possesses. Beyond anything any species possesses. I walked forward into the ancient city, my transformed feet making no sound on the perfectly preserved streets. The buildings were covered in symbols I couldn't read, but something about them seemed familiar. Not the shapes themselves, but the logic behind them, mathematical progressions, geometric relationships, patterns that spoke to something deep in my restructured brain. I can almost understand this, I said, stopping before a wall covered in inscriptions. It's like a language I knew as a child and forgot. The words are on the tip of my tongue. The architects designed their technology to be intuitive to any intelligence, Vethkasorn explained. They wanted their legacy to be accessible to all their children, regardless of how evolution shaped them. If you are sensing something, it is because your modified brain is finding connections that your original human mind could not perceive. I reached out and touched the wall, and the symbols flared to life, brilliant gold against the dark stone. The light spread outward from my hand, racing along the inscriptions, illuminating more and more of the city around us. The effect was breathtaking, like watching stars being born. Child of children, a voice said in my mind, and this one was different from the core's older still, but also somehow warmer. You have been remade. You seek the path home. But the path home passes through what you are becoming. I don't want to become anything, I said. I just want my life back. The life you knew is gone. It died when they took you, when they changed you. What stands in this place is not Marcuschen the human, but something new. The question is not whether you will become, but what you will become. How do I get back to Earth? Earth cannot contain what you are now. But Earth can be made ready. Your body cannot survive Earth's atmosphere. But your body can be remade, again, to survive anything. This is the gift we left behind, the power to adapt, to transform, to become whatever is necessary for survival. The light spread further, revealing a central plaza dominated by a structure that looked like an enormous chair, or perhaps a throne. Cables and conduits extended from it in all directions, connecting to the buildings around it like the spokes of a wheel. The transformation engine, the voice explained. Here, any being can be reshaped into any form. It was our final gift to our children, the key to transcending the limitations of biology. But it requires a price. What price? You must surrender what you were. Completely. Utterly. The transformation engine does not modify, it destroys and rebuilds. The Marcuschen who sits in that chair will be annihilated. What rises from it will carry his memories, his desires, his love for the world he left behind. But it will not be him. Not truly. I stood before the engine, feeling its ancient power hum against my skin. Vethkasorn had stopped at the edge of the plaza, unwilling or unable to approach any closer. The choice before me was impossible: surrender everything I was for the chance to go home, or remain trapped in this half-life, this broken existence between human and alien. But hadn't I already surrendered? Hadn't the medical error already destroyed Marcuschen? What was sitting in that chair compared to what had already been done to me? If I do this, I said slowly, what will I become? That depends on you. The engine does not choose, it responds. It will read your deepest self, your true desires, and it will build accordingly. If you go into it wanting nothing but to return to your small life on Earth, that is what you will become, a being perfectly adapted for that world and that existence. But if you carry larger dreams, deeper desires, if somewhere in your heart you have always known you were meant for more, the engine will respond to that as well. I thought about my life on Earth. The job I tolerated but never loved. The marriage that had crumbled because neither of us was willing to fight for it. The apartment that was more prison than home. The years I had spent going through the motions, pretending to be content when every cell in my body had been screaming for something more. The aliens had taken that life from me. They had violated me, transformed me against my will, made me into something monstrous and strange. But, in doing so, hadn't they also set me free? Free from the routines that had been suffocating me. Free from the expectations I had never been able to meet. Free from the version of Marcuschen who had been slowly dying of mediocrity. The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others, I said out loud. You begin to understand. If I do this, will I still want to go home? Or will going home become just another small dream? That is the risk. The engine will give you what you truly want. But what you truly want may not be what you think you want. Many who have sat in that chair discovered that their deepest desire was not for the life they had left behind, but for something entirely different. Some found peace in that discovery. Others found only despair. Behind me, I heard sounds in the spiral passage. The Council's forces had found the entrance to the depths. They were coming. Marcuschen, Vethkasorn called out, we are out of time. Whatever you are going to do, you must do it now. I looked at the engine, at the throne that promised to destroy and remake me, and I made my decision. Not the safe decision. Not the smart decision. But the only decision I could live with. I climbed into the chair. The moment my body made contact with the ancient surface, cables shot out from everywhere, from the armrests, from the floor, from the conduits that spread across the plaza. They penetrated my skin without pain, diving deep into my tissue, connecting to my alien heart and my merged liver and my poison-producing kidney. I felt them reading me, analyzing me, preparing me for what was to come. This will not be painless, the voice warned. Destruction never is. Just do it. The engine activated. I had thought I knew pain. I had thought the cold awakening, the discovery of what had been done to me, the transformation I had already undergone, I had thought those experiences had prepared me for anything. I was wrong. The engine took me apart. Not physically, but essentially. It reached into the core of what made me Marcus Chen and began dismantling it piece by piece. Memories shattered like glass, my first kiss, my wedding day, my mother's face, and were swept away into a void. Beliefs I had held since childhood were examined, found wanting, and discarded. Fears that had shaped my entire life were exposed to a light so bright they simply evaporated. I screamed, or tried to. But I no longer had a mouth to scream with. I was being broken down into components smaller than atoms, smaller than quarks, into the fundamental information that made up consciousness itself. And, from that broken state, I could see everything I had been with perfect clarity. I saw the boy who had always felt different, who had always known he was meant for more than the life his parents had planned for him. I saw the young man who had buried that feeling under practicality and fear, who had chosen the safe path at every crossroads because the alternative was too frightening to contemplate. I saw the husband who had watched his marriage dissolve and told himself it was for the best, because fighting for love would have required admitting he didn't know how to love himself. I saw the man in the car, driving through rain and traffic, already dead inside and just waiting for his body to catch up. And I saw what I had become since the taking. The rage that had driven me. The strength I had discovered. The choices I had made to fight, to survive, to refuse to be a victim even when victimhood would have been easier. What do you want? The engine asked, and the question was not about going home. It was about everything. It was about who I would be when the rebuilding was complete. It was about the fundamental nature of my existence. I thought about Earth. I thought about Seattle. I thought about rain on windshields and brake lights and quiet evenings and all the small comforts of a small life. And I thought about standing on an alien station orbiting Jupiter, about absorbing energy from weapons designed to kill me, about tearing through restraints that should have been unbreakable. I thought about the core speaking in my mind and the architect technology responding to my touch and the feeling of finally, being awake after a lifetime of sleepwalking. I want to go home, I thought, answering the engine's question. But I don't want to go back to what I was. I want to be the person who can protect Earth, who can stand between humanity and all the things in this universe that would harm them. I want to be strong enough to never be taken again. I want to be whole. Then, so you shall be. The rebuilding began. Vethkasorn watched from the edge of the plaza as the transformation engine did its work. The human, if he could still be called human, was suspended in a web of light and cables, his form shifting and changing in ways that should have been impossible. The nurse had seen many strange things in their long life, but nothing like this. The council's forces emerged from the spiral passage, their armored forms filling the street that led to the plaza. At their head was Councillor Vethkasorn's own sibling, whose rise to power had come at the cost of everything the nurse believed in. You have committed treason, Vethkamorn declared, their galaxy eyes burning with fury. You have brought an uncontrolled specimen into the forbidden depths. You have activated technology that was sealed for reasons you cannot comprehend. I comprehend perfectly, Vethkasorn replied. I comprehend that you and your council are terrified of anything you cannot control. I comprehend that you would rather let the galaxy stagnate than risk someone becoming more than you are. That creature was ours. Ours to study. Ours to use. And you have given it the power to. The light from the transformation engine pulsed, and both siblings fell silent. Something was happening. The cables were withdrawing, retracting back into the ancient machinery. The form suspended in the center of the web was beginning to coalesce, to solidify, to become something definite. What emerged was not Marcus Chen. Not exactly. It was humanoid, yes. Roughly the same height and build as the man who had entered. But the skin was no longer simply luminescent, it shifted through colors like light through a prism, adapting to the environment moment by moment. The eyes that opened were not human eyes, they contained depths that spoke of vast distances and longer times. The hands that flexed were stronger than any organic material had a right to be, fingers that could bend steel or caress a child's cheek with equal precision. The being stepped down from the engine and stood in the plaza, looking around with an expression of wonder. "I remember everything," it said, and the voice was Marcus Chen's, but also more than that. "I remember who I was. I remember why I'm here. And I remember what I have to do." "What you have to do," Counselor Vethkamorn snarled, "is surrender. The engine may have changed your form, but you are still on our station. You are still outnumbered. You are still." The being moved, and it was like watching light travel. One moment it was standing by the engine, the next it was among the council's forces, and soldiers were flying in all directions like leaves in a hurricane. The being didn't kill. The nurse noticed that even in its new form, it chose not to kill, but within seconds, every soldier was down. The being stood before Counselor Vethkamorn, and the difference in power between them was so vast that it was almost comical. The counselor, who had spent centuries consolidating authority and inspiring fear, looked like a child facing a storm. "I'm going home," the being said. "I'm going to protect Earth from the things you and your kind have done to me. But before I go, I'm going to do something else." "What?" "I'm going to free them. Every human you've taken. Every experiment you've performed. Every species you've bent to your will. The Kethmasai are not going to use the galaxy as your laboratory anymore." The being turned to Vethkasorn, and those impossible eyes showed something that might have been gratitude. "You helped me when you didn't have to. You risked everything because you believed it was right. I won't forget that." "What will you do now?" the nurse asked. "What I said. Free the others. And then." The being looked upward, through untold layers of station, toward the stars beyond. "Then, I'm going home. But not as a refugee. Not as a victim. As something that can actually make a difference." The being began to move toward the spiral passage, and Counselor Vethkamorn made one last desperate attempt, firing a weapon that should have vaporized anything it touched. The being didn't even slow down. It absorbed the energy, added it to its own power, and kept walking. "This is not over," the counselor shouted after it. "The council will not forget this affront. We will hunt you across the galaxy. You'll do what you've always done," the being said without looking back. "You'll scheme and plot and tell yourselves you're in control. But you're not in control anymore. The era of taking without consequence is over. I'm going to make sure of that." The being disappeared up the passage, leaving chaos and broken soldiers in its wake. Vethkasorn looked at their sibling, at the fear and rage warring on the counselor's face, and felt something they hadn't felt in centuries. Hope. The journey through the station was different now. Before, the walls had watched me with alien surveillance, trying to track and trap. Now they watched with something closer to fear. The station was alive, and, like all living things, it understood when it was in the presence of something more powerful. I didn't hurry. There was no need. The council's forces that had pursued me into the depths were scattered and recovering. The ones throughout the rest of the station had received word of what I had become, and they were keeping their distance. I found the detention levels first. They stretched for what felt like miles, row after row of cells containing beings from dozens of species. Some were clearly prisoners, taken for experimentation like I had been. Others appeared to be political dissidents, enemies of the council who had been disappeared. Still others seemed to be refugees, beings who had come to the station seeking help and found only captivity. I opened every cell. I broke every lock. I told them that the path to the shuttle bays was clear, that the council was in disarray, that now was their chance. Most of them ran. A few stayed, too broken or too afraid to believe that freedom was possible. For those, I did what I could. Healing touch that the engine had given me, words of comfort that came from the Marcuscan part of me who still remembered what it felt like to be afraid. One of the prisoners was human. A woman, maybe 40, with gray streaks in her dark hair and eyes that had seen too much. She looked at me with a mixture of awe and terror. "What are you?" she whispered. I was Marcuscan. I'm still Marcuscan, in a way. I was taken like you were. Changed. But I found a way to change myself even more. I extended my hand. I'm going back to Earth. I can take you with me. She stared at my hand, at the shifting colors of my skin, the impossible perfection of my form, and I saw her struggle with the decision. Trust the monster that had freed her, or remain in the familiar hell of her cell. She took my hand. "I'm Sarah," she said. "Sarah Okonkwo. They took me from Lagos 3 years ago." 3 years? Time moves differently here. Or so they tell me. Her grip tightened. Are there others? Other humans? I don't know. I haven't found any yet. But I'm still looking. We searched together. The detention levels gave way to laboratory complexes, and in those labs we found things that turned even my transformed stomach. Experiments in progress. Beings dissected while still alive, kept conscious to measure their pain responses. Genetic manipulation that had created creatures that never should have existed, hybrid monstrosities that screamed for death. I gave them death, where I could. Mercy, where death was not needed. And rage, the deep, burning rage that had never truly left me, at the beings who had done this. We found no other humans in the labs. But we found records, databases that detailed every experiment the Council had performed over millennia. I downloaded everything I could, storing it in the vast memory banks my transformed brain now possessed. Evidence. Proof. Something I could take back to Earth to show them what was out here, what they needed to be ready for. "The shuttle bay is this way," Sarah said, pointing to a junction in the corridor. I remember from when they brought me in. But I was looking in a different direction. Toward the heart of the station. Toward where I knew the Council chambers lay. There's something I need to do first. What could possibly be more important than getting out of here? Making sure they can never do this again. I left Sarah at the junction, promising to return, and made my way to the center of power. The walls tried to impede me now, growing closed, forming barriers, even attempting to attack with organic weapons that erupted from the floor and ceiling. None of it mattered. I was beyond the station's ability to harm. The Council chambers were vast and circular, designed to intimidate. 12 thrones arranged around a central pit, where those who displeased the Council were made to stand and answer for their crimes. When I entered, 11 of the thrones were occupied. The 12th, Vethkamorn's, I assumed, was empty. Marcuscan, the central figure said, and I recognized the voice from somewhere. A memory that survived the transformation, from when I was still lying on that table, just waking up. Or should we call you something else now? You are hardly human anymore. I am human enough. And I am here to give you a choice. A choice? Laughter rippled around the chamber, that strange telepathic laughter that was more felt than heard. You storm into our chambers, one being against the collective might of the HFY Confederation, and you speak of giving us choices? The transformation engine gave me more than a new body. It gave me understanding. I know now what the architects intended when they seeded life across the galaxy. And I know how far the HFY have fallen from that intention. The laughter stopped. The architects wanted their children to grow, to evolve, to reach their highest potential. They left tools like the engine behind so that species could transcend their limitations. But, you. I let my gaze travel around the circle of thrones. You have used those tools to keep other species limited. To experiment on them, control them, ensure that no one ever becomes powerful enough to challenge your dominance. We have maintained order, one of the council members said. Without our guidance, the galaxy would descend into chaos. Without your guidance, the galaxy might finally have a chance to grow up. I stepped forward, and every council member flinched. Here is your choice. You will release every prisoner on this station. You will destroy your experimentation programs. You will share the knowledge you have hoarded with all species who seek it. And you will begin the process of transforming the HFY from masters into partners. And if we refuse? I smiled, and I knew it was not a human smile. If you refuse, I will do it for you. I will tear this station apart piece by piece. I will broadcast your crimes to every corner of the galaxy. And when other species come to pick through the wreckage, I will make sure they find everything, every dirty secret, every atrocity, every nightmare you have hidden in these depths. The HFY Confederation will cease to exist, not because I destroyed it, but because the universe will finally see what you truly are. Silence filled the chamber. The council members looked at each other, communicating in ways I could sense but not interpret. They were weighing their options, calculating odds, trying to find a way out. They wouldn't find one. I had made sure of that. We accept your terms, the central figure said finally, and I could hear the bitterness in every syllable. The prisoners will be released. The experiments will end. We will share what we know. And one more thing. What? You will leave Earth alone. Forever. No more abductions. No more observations. No more interference of any kind. Humanity will be allowed to develop on their own terms, to become whatever they choose to become. If I ever learn that the HFY have violated this condition, I will return. And I will not be merciful a second time. The council agreed. They had no choice. I left the chambers and made my way back to Sarah, who was waiting exactly where I had left her, surrounded by a small group of other former prisoners who had chosen not to flee immediately. It's done, I said. They won't pursue us. They won't harm anyone else. Not for a while, at least. What did you do? I showed them what happens when their experiments exceed their expectations. End of part 2. The shuttle bay was chaos when we arrived. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species were fighting over the available vessels, desperate to escape before the council changed its mind. The HFY security forces had withdrawn as promised, but that just meant there was no one to maintain order. I waded into the middle of the conflict, and my presence had an immediate effect. Beings who had been grappling over access to a shuttle stopped and stared. Those who had been shouting fell silent. In seconds, the chaos had transformed into a kind of odd stillness. There are enough vessels for everyone, I said, and my voice carried to every corner of the bay without effort. Form orderly lines. Help those who cannot help themselves. No one will be left behind. They obeyed. Not because they had to, but because something in them recognized that I meant what I said. The evacuation proceeded smoothly after that, beings filing onto shuttles in groups organized by destination, families staying together, the injured being carried by those who were whole. I helped where I could. My transformed body seemed to know what to do even when my conscious mind didn't, lifting beings too heavy for anyone else to move, providing medical attention through touch to those who needed it, even interfacing with the shuttle navigation systems to plot courses that would avoid HFY patrol routes. Sarah stayed by my side throughout. She had become my connection to humanity, a reminder of what I was fighting to protect and return to. When she looked at me, she didn't see a monster or an experiment, she saw a person who had suffered what she had suffered and found a way to overcome it. You're different from when you found me, she said as we watched the last shuttle before ours prepare for departure. More settled. Like you've made peace with something. I have. Or I'm starting to. I watched the shuttle lift off, carrying a load of beings to freedom. For so long, I thought what they did to me was the worst thing that could ever happen. Being taken, changed, turned into something I never asked to be. But now I'm starting to see it differently. How? They broke me. Completely. They took everything I was and shattered it into pieces. But, in doing that, they gave me the chance to put those pieces back together in a new way. A better way. I turned to look at her. I spent my whole life on Earth being afraid. Afraid of failure, afraid of success, afraid of wanting anything too much in case I lost it. That fear made me small. It made me weak. And it made me easy to take. And now I'm not afraid anymore. Not because I'm powerful, although I am that, but because I've faced the worst and survived. I've been destroyed and rebuilt. There's nothing the universe can throw at me that I haven't already overcome. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then, she said something that surprised me. You know you can't just go back to normal life, right? Whatever normal means for someone like you. You can't pretend to be just Marcus Chen, structural engineer from Seattle. I know. So what are you going to do? I had been thinking about that question since I walked out of the transformation engine. The answer had taken shape slowly, built from the memories of who I had been and the understanding of what I had become. Earth doesn't know what's out here. They have no idea that there are beings who see them as specimens, as resources, as primitive creatures to be studied and exploited. I'm going to change that. I'm going to warn them, prepare them, help them become strong enough to stand on their own in a universe that doesn't care about their survival. That's a big job for one person. Even one person like you. Then, I'll start small. Find others who've been through what we have. Build something that can grow. I smiled, and this time it felt almost human. I've learned that strength isn't about being able to do everything yourself. It's about being able to break down the walls that keep people weak. That's what I'm going to do. Break down walls. Our shuttle was waiting. It was the last one in the bay, a small vessel designed for short-range transport but modified by my transformed abilities to handle the journey to Earth. I had interfaced with its systems, rewritten its navigation, and adjusted its life support to maintain the specific atmospheric conditions my alien heart required. The journey would take weeks, but we would survive. Sarah and I boarded together. The others who had been waiting with us had found places on earlier shuttles, heading to their own homeworlds or to neutral stations where they could start new lives. We were the only ones bound for Earth. Are you sure you want to come with me? I asked as I initiated the launch sequence. Earth isn't what you remember. 3 years have passed. Everything will be different. Everything is different for you too. More different than for me. She strapped herself into the co-pilot seat. But, you're going anyway. I figure if you can face all that uncertainty, so can I. The shuttle lifted off, carrying us out of the bay and into the void between stars. Behind us, the HFY Sci-Fi station grew smaller and smaller until it was just a speck against the backdrop of Jupiter's swirling clouds. Ahead of us lay the long journey home. The weeks that followed were strange. Peaceful in a way I hadn't experienced since before the taking, but also charged with the energy of anticipation. I spent the time learning the full extent of my transformation, testing the limits of my strength, exploring the capabilities of my new senses, understanding the complex biology that now sustained me. My alien heart, it turned out, was far more than a simple pump. It was a power generator, a biological reactor that converted energy from multiple sources, light, heat, radiation, even emotional intensity, into the fuel my transformed body needed. The merged liver filtered not just toxins but information, analyzing everything that passed through my bloodstream and reporting findings directly to my consciousness. And the kidney that had once produced poison now produced something far more useful, a compound that enhanced cellular regeneration, making me nearly impossible to kill through physical damage. I was, in every meaningful sense, a new species. The first of my kind. A template that could be replicated if I chose to share what I had become. Sarah and I talked during the long hours between systems. She told me about her life before the taking, a career in international law, a husband who had probably given her up for dead, 2 children who would be teenagers now. I told her about my life, the failures, the mediocrity, the slow death of ambition that had defined my existence on Earth. You don't sound like you were happy, she observed one evening, as we watched the stars stream past outside our viewport. I wasn't. I didn't even know I wasn't, because I'd never been happy enough to know the difference. I thought contentment was the best anyone could hope for. And, now? I considered the question. What I felt now was difficult to name. It wasn't exactly happiness, that seemed too simple a word for the complex mixture of purpose, power, and peace that filled me. It was more like completeness. Like all the scattered pieces of who I was supposed to be had finally come together into a coherent whole. Now I know what I'm for, I said finally. I spent my whole life not knowing, and now I do. That's better than happiness. That's meaning. Sarah nodded slowly. I hope I can find something like that. After all this. You will. I'll make sure of it. The journey continued. We passed through systems I had never heard of, following routes the Kethmasai had used to move their stolen specimens away from watching eyes. The deeper we got into what the galaxy considered human space, the more I began to sense something. We weren't alone. The feeling started as a faint tickle at the edge of my consciousness, a sense of being observed, tracked, followed. At first I attributed it to paranoia, the residual fear of pursuit from the station. But, as the days passed, the feeling grew stronger, more defined. Someone is following us, I told Sarah one morning. I can feel them. The council? I thought you said they agreed to let us go. They did. This is something else. Something. I searched for the right word. Curious. A day later, the curiosity introduced itself. The ship appeared out of nowhere, dropping from faster-than-light travel directly alongside our shuttle with a precision that should have been impossible. It was like nothing I had seen on the Kethmasai station, sleek, elegant, made of materials that seemed to shift between solid and light. And the beings who emerged from it when they matched our airlock were unlike anything in the galaxy. They were tall, willowy, with silver skin and eyes that held the same swirling depth I had seen in my own reflection since the transformation. They moved with a grace that made even the Kethmasai look clumsy. And they spoke, not telepathically like the station's inhabitants, but in a language that I somehow understood perfectly. We have been watching you, Marcus Chen, the leader said. She was clearly she, despite the alien biology, had an air of ancient wisdom that reminded me of the architect voice from the transformation chamber. We have been watching since you entered the engine. Since you became what we once were. What you once were. We are the remnant. The last survivors of the architect civilization, though we do not call ourselves by that name. For millions of years, we have watched the galaxy, guiding when we could, protecting when we must. We left the engines behind so that our children, all the species we seeded across the stars, could one day join us. You are the first to complete the transformation since the fall of our empire. I didn't know how to respond. The architects, the beings whose technology had remade me, were not extinct after all. They had been watching, waiting, hoping that someone would find the path to transcendence. Why didn't you help? All those millennia, all those species suffering under beings like the Council, why didn't you intervene? Because intervention is not growth. If we had swept down and solved every problem, removed every obstacle, our children would never have become strong enough to stand on their own. They would have remained dependent, forever childlike. The leader's silver eyes held ancient sorrow. It was not easy to watch. It has never been easy. But, we made the choice long ago that the only way our legacy could truly survive was if our children surpassed us through their own efforts, not through our gifts. But, you left the engines behind. Those are gifts. Tools. Opportunities. The engines cannot be used by anyone who was not ready, they would simply destroy a being who tried to transform without the necessary foundation. That you survived, that you emerged stronger rather than dead, tells us that you were already on the path to transcendence. We simply helped you complete the journey. I thought about everything I had experienced. The taking. The error. The rage and the fear and the desperate journey through the station's depths. The choice I had made in the engine chamber, to surrender what I was for the chance to become something better. What do you want from me now? We want to offer you a place among us. You are the first of a new generation, Marcus Chen. The first human to join the remnant since we seeded your world with life billions of years ago. You could come with us, learn what we have learned, become part of something larger than any single species or civilization. It was tempting. More tempting than I wanted to admit. To leave behind the struggles of Earth, the complications of human society, the burden of being something the universe had never seen before. To join beings who understood what I was, who could teach me to master my new abilities, who might even be able to give me the peace I had never found as a human. But I looked at Sarah, sleeping in her seat, exhausted from the long journey and the trauma of everything she had endured. I thought about Earth, about the billions of people going about their lives with no idea what was out there waiting for them. I thought about my grandmother's words, echoing across the decades: the man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others. I had destroyed my weak self. I had become something that couldn't be broken by the council or anyone else. But becoming unbreakable wasn't the end of the journey. It was the beginning. It meant I now had the responsibility to help others find their own strength, to protect those who hadn't yet completed their own transformations. I'm honored, I said to the remnant leader. More honored than I can express. But I can't come with you. Not yet. There's work I need to do on Earth. People who need my help. A world that needs to be prepared for what's coming. The leader smiled, and I realized she had expected this answer. We know. We have watched enough beings come through the engines to recognize the ones who will choose duty over comfort. That is, in fact, part of why we came to meet you. She held out her hand, and in it was a small device, crystalline, pulsing with inner light. A gift. A true gift, not a tool. This will allow you to contact us when you are ready. When you have done what you need to do on Earth. When you have prepared your species for the next stage of their journey. We will be waiting. I took the device, and the moment it touched my palm, I felt a connection snap into place, a link to something vast and ancient and patient. Thank you. No, Marcus Chen. Thank you. For showing us that our children are still capable of growing beyond what they are. For giving us hope that the long watch will not be endless. She turned to go, then paused. One more thing. The HFY Sci Council will not forget what you have done. They will hide and plan and rebuild their strength, and one day they will come for Earth in force. You have perhaps a century, perhaps less, before they are ready. Use that time wisely. The remnant departed as silently as they had arrived, their ship slipping back into faster-than-light travel and vanishing from our sensors. Sarah slept through the entire encounter. I didn't wake her. Instead, I sat in the pilot's seat and watched the stars, thinking about